It is a fairly curious story, this one, isn't it? Palestinian migrants being given the green light to live in the UK under a scheme meant for Ukrainian refugees. I mean, that in itself may well, you might think, have provoked or certainly highlighted a problem with the application. The family of 6 fleeing Gaza have won the right to join their brother in Britain after an immigration judge ruled the Home Office's rejection was unlawful. And the decision, of course, has sparked fears that this could open some sort of floodgate for more migrants coming not just from Palestine but other conflict zones to join relatives in the United Kingdom. Let's speak with Henry Smith, former Conservative MP. Henry, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Your assessment on this story, sir?
Well, it is just quite remarkable that yet again we see activist judges who are essentially making UK immigration policy and using a scheme that is designed for a completely different situation, the matter in Ukraine, rather than that in Gaza, to run roughshod over what Parliament decides on immigration. And really, Parliament needs to very clearly state that it is sovereign when it comes to immigration and national security matters. And this isn't something where a judge sitting alone effectively gets to determine what sort of people and where from in the world can come to this country. It really is something that I hope and I trust the government will urgently address.
You'd think so, but of course the human rights element of this is the sticking point, it seems. I've heard people, it's sort of tacit defence of the judge, say, look, the judge is only upholding the law as it stands, and that law talks about a right to safety and the right to family life, etc., and therefore he was faced with no decision. I'm sure there is wiggle room for the judge, but ultimately ECHR is where we're at on this, and that is something, of course, that your government in the past and continues to support. That's the sticking point, right?
Well, you are right. Until we are bound by the European Convention on Human Rights and the courts that administers decisions from that treaty, until we are free of that, then these decisions will be able to be made by judges. I think it was a very liberal interpretation of the court that was made by this judge in this case. But nevertheless, your fundamental point is absolutely right, that until Parliament reasserts, either by leaving the ECHR or saying that when it comes to matters of immigration and national security, Parliament's wishes come first, which it should be in our constitution. Until Parliament states either of those two things, we're going to see case after case like this. And it sets very dangerous precedents, as you said in your introduction, for people essentially being able to come to this country from any troubled part of the world. Potentially that's several billion people, which is obviously an absurd situation.
I guess one of the other issues is that there are, this particular judge, Judge Hugo Norton-Taylor, I'm sure is a perfectly nice man to have a pint with, maybe not, but you take the point. But when it comes to this area, there are many other Hugo Norton-Taylors out there. There are activists, there are people that will be almost mining for cases to represent and to address or bring over to this country or others, for that matter, throughout Europe. So there is a precedent issue here, isn't there? Once you've given that green light, there is now an example in law that other judges and other agitators in this particular area will point to and say, look, a judge did it before, so why not?
Well, you're absolutely right, Ian. This country suffers from far too many liberal activist lawyers who are seeking to essentially govern this country in a way that they would ideally like to see, and not in a way that those actually elected by the populace typically want to see. And we have far too much of this attitude. And each case builds on case law, which other activist judges and lawyers can look to emulate. And we have this, unfortunately, from the current government, the establishment of this country, that it is very heavily sort of so-called human right lawyer weighted in a way that really the interests of British people, our security, pressure on housing, on public services, all the other things that large-scale immigration means, is ignored. And it's quite instructive, I think, actually, that other Arab nations are refusing to allow people from Gaza to resettle. Just last year, I was in the Gaza border area, and it was very striking how the Egyptians had erected, I don't know, it was a 20, 30-foot very secure border wall to stop Palestinians coming into Egypt. Very similar situation with Jordan.
I was just going to say that I think the Jordanians
well.
feel similar to that too. In terms of where this ECHR law goes, which does seem central to some of these decisions, Kemi Badenoch hasn't made any noises about getting rid of it. We know Reform UK are very vocal about getting rid of it. Some would say, well, it just needs reforming. I would take a guess, Henry, there's almost no chance of that happening. So what should the Conservative position be on this?
Well, the position that I favour is that we leave the ECHR. This country has been developing human rights and protections. Actually, it started in 1215 with the Magna Carta, went through the Civil War, the Bill of Rights, and much more recent pieces of legislation. The ECHR was really brought in after the Second World War to protect people in former dictatorships like Nazi Germany and then subsequently the Soviet bloc countries from abuse by their governments. So the idea that we need to be lectured to by a European Court on Human Rights when we have been defenders of human rights and developers of human rights over hundreds of years is really quite absurd. Other countries, the United States, for example, managed to have their own human rights system. And this country should have its own independent system as well. And Parliament really does need to state that in our Constitution. Parliament is sovereign, and it needs to really, quite literally, lay down the law.
Henry, thank you for your time as ever. He's Henry Smith, former Conservative MP, but he is pro getting rid of the European Court of Human Rights.